All right, let's get right into it. We are breaking down a huge legal fight that puts the state of Texas head-to-head with one of the biggest names out there in political fundraising, ActBlue. And this whole thing, it's a story about digital donations, claims of deception, and a conflict that's actually been heating up for years.
So, you gotta wonder, right? How does a platform that just processes donations get sued for something like deceptive practices? I mean, you probably think of these platforms as just a digital collection plate, pretty simple. But this lawsuit says, nope, it's way more complicated than that. So let's unpack exactly how ActBlue ended up in this massive legal battle with Texas.
Okay, so the first big move happened on April 20th, 2026. That was the day the Texas Attorney General's office went all in and filed this major lawsuit against ActBlue. And just like that, years of quiet investigating and public jabs turned into a formal legal war that could have some seriously big consequences.
Now, this is where the legal strategy gets really interesting. See, Texas isn't suing ActBlue under regular old election law. No, they're using a consumer protection law, the Deceptive Trade Practices Act, and that move completely changes the game. The main question isn't just about campaign finance rules anymore. It's about whether ActBlue, tricked the public, the donors, about how safe and secure its platform really was. So what exactly is Texas claiming ActBlue did wrong? Let's get into the nuts and bolts of it. We're going to break down the state's specific claims and get to the heart of why they decided to file this lawsuit in the first place. The entire lawsuit pretty much boils down to three main accusations. First, that ActBlue was deceptive about its security. Second, that it had these loopholes that let people donate with untraceable gift cards. And third, that these weak spots made it easy for a specific kind of illegal donation to happen. We're going to look at all three, but first, we need to define a key term. You'll see the term straw donations all over this lawsuit. So what is that? Well, it's pretty simple. It's when one person donates money using someone else's name, usually so they can get around the legal limits on how much they can give. Here's an analogy. Imagine you're not allowed to donate a single $1 million boulder. The lawsuit basically alleges that ActBlue's platform lets someone smash that boulder into thousands of tiny, untraceable pebbles, and then donate each pebble in a different person's name. It's a practice sometimes called Smurfing, and it's a huge part of the state's case.
And that gets us to the deception claim. Texas says that while ActBlue was out there telling everyone, Congress, its users, how amazing and multi-layered its security was, behind the scenes, it knew its systems had some major holes. Think of it like a car company that's airing commercials about its 5-star safety rating, while its own engineers are writing internal memos saying, the airbags might not actually work in a crash. The lawsuit is saying that's the kind of disconnect that was going on.
So, you might be thinking, where did all this come from? Well, this legal fight definitely didn't just pop up out of nowhere in 2026. Nope. It was the final step after years of escalating tension. Let's walk through the timeline and see how what started as a simple investigation totally snowballed into this huge lawsuit.
So the story really kicks off back in December 2023 when Texas first opened its investigation. A few months later, by August 2024, ActBlue started requiring those 3-digit CVV security codes for donations, a change the Texas AG's office pointed to as an early win. But the pressure didn't stop. Texas petitioned the FEC, things kept heating up. But the real game changer, the moment that blew the whole thing wide open, came in April of 2026.
And this was the tipping point. The New York Times dropped a bombshell report revealing internal memos from ActBlue's own outside law firm. And according to the story, these memos warned that the company's vetting processes were weak enough that someone could allege knowing and willful violations of election law. In legal terms, knowing and willful is absolute dynamite. It suggests they knew about the problem and didn't fix it. For the Texas AG, this was the smoking gun they were looking for. The lawsuit was filed just a few days later.
Okay, so with all that backstory covered, where does that leave us now? Let's take a look at what both sides are arguing and what's really at stake here, not just for ActBlue, but honestly, for the future of how political fundraising works online. As you can probably guess, the two sides are on completely different planets. On one hand, you have the Texas AG, Ken Paxton, who's framing this as a critical fight to protect election integrity and enforce consumer protection laws. But on the other side, ActBlue is firing back hard, denying they did anything wrong and calling the whole lawsuit a political stunt, a thinly veiled attempt to distract from the AG's own legal issues. It is a classic, high-stakes legal showdown. So what's really on the line, financially speaking? Well, under this Deceptive Trade Practices Act, the potential penalty is up to $10,000 per violation. Now just stop and think about that. Multiply that number by the millions of individual donations that ActBlue processed for people in Texas. We're talking about a potential liability that is absolutely astronomical. The stakes could not be higher.
And all of this leaves us with one final, really big question. Platforms like ActBlue are built to be fast and easy, right? They make it super convenient for millions of people to get involved. But this lawsuit really makes us ask, in our digital world, where does that convenience end? And where does a platform's legal responsibility begin? The answer to that question is going to have huge implications for the future of online political fundraising.